The book of Isaiah contains some of the most stunning prophecies we have in all the Bible, especially in chapters 40 to 66. And it's principally because of this that many liberal scholars and other detractors argue that Isaiah is not the product of just one person, but of many writers. They say that editors down the centuries came back and redacted the work and changed what initially would appear to be prophecy into history because the events had already transpired when these redactors wrote and edited the book. However, as we saw last time, there are many sound reasons to accept the unity of the book, to believe that one person wrote this book, and it was Isaiah, the 8th century prophet. So, what's going on? Well, we're going to discover what's going on together today. Let me read from a very important passage in Isaiah. It's Isaiah chapter 44, verse 28 through chapter 45, verse 1a. Let's listen. God says of Cyrus, "He is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure, even saying to Jerusalem, you shall be built, and to the temple, your foundation will be laid down. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed one, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have held, to subdue nations before him." Interesting. And so what do we have here? Well, we have a person identified specifically by name, Cyrus. And this person is given sort of a job description. He's going to be the shepherd of God, the servant of the Most High. And he's going to release the Jews from some captivity where they will be able to go back and rebuild their homeland and go back and restore their temple. All very good things. And so this looks benign enough at first blush until you begin to analyze the context a little bit. So let's remind ourselves, when did Isaiah write this book? Well, he wrote it during the reign of 4 kings whose regnal dates we know, and so we know he wrote somewhere between 740 and 680 BC. And so he's writing within that frame of reference. But do we know anything about Cyrus? Do we know when he became a hero and delivered the Jews? When does he become a liberator? When does he come on the scene? Well, actually, both secular historians and sacred historians know the answer to that question. It's very well documented. We know that Cyrus is the king of Persia, the Medo-Persian Empire. And we also know that the Persians are the ones who will conquer the Babylonians. And when they conquer the Babylonians, the Persians, in point of fact, do liberate the Jews. Well, why did the Jews need liberating? Because they will have been held for 70 years captive under the hand of Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. And so they will be released from that captivity and sent home. But when does that happen? Well, that's going to happen around 535 BC. And so the quandary for the liberal side becomes clear. Isaiah's writing around 700, 705. We'll just take a guess, somewhere within that reference point. Isaiah's writing around 700. The Babylonians will not even come on the scene for another 100 years. They will take as hostages Judah and the people of Jerusalem in 3 deportations: 605, 597, 586. And at the end, they will annihilate Jerusalem, and they will destroy the temple. But that's not going to happen for over 100 years from the time of this writing. Then there's going to be a 70-year captivity, of which Jeremiah writes very specifically, as a matter of fact. Jeremiah says in chapter 25 and in chapter 29, in both those places, he says, you're going to be in captivity for 70 years. And we know that is precisely what happened. Then the Persians will rise up under the command of Cyrus, the general king liberator, and overpower and subdue the Babylonians. But at the time of this writing, Cyrus wasn't even born. More than that, his grandpa wasn't even born. He wasn't on the radar screen. He was nothing. And the Persians were not a world power. And the people had not been taken into exile yet. From Isaiah's vantage point, Jerusalem was fine. The temple was fine. Didn't need to be rebuilt, didn't need to be restored. He's looking ahead. He is prophesying of coming future events. Now, it becomes very clear that no human being can make such prophetical statements. No human being can tell the future with precision, detailed specificity. It's impossible to do. And yet that's what we have right here in Isaiah. It would be like if we found a document from the beginning of the Civil War, around 1861. That's a long time ago. Roughly the same time span. If we found a document dated around 1861, the beginning of the Civil War, in which the writer wrote something like this: in 2019, Donald Trump will be the president of the United States. He's going to cut corporate tax rates. He'll appoint a couple of Supreme Court justices, and he will do his darndest to erect a wall of separation between America and Mexico. Well, we all know that that's ludicrous. That's absurd. That could never happen. Because human beings cannot predict the future like that. Only God can do such things. And in this case, he did. He forecast the future 170 years before it would happen. And he gave precise, specific instructions and details about what was coming in naming the liberator, Cyrus. And it's not just Isaiah that writes about Cyrus. If you know your Old Testament, you know the writer of 2 Chronicles in chapter 36 writes a passage about Cyrus. You'll also know that Ezra in chapter 1 writes about Cyrus. And you know what it seems happened? After the Persians conquer the Babylonians and Cyrus is the great liberator, the people who knew the word went to him, went to Cyrus, and they showed him in their sacred literature these texts the texts in Isaiah, the texts in Jeremiah. Isaiah speaks directly of the person. Jeremiah speaks directly of the exile and how it would end in 70 years and how the people would be able to return. And Cyrus was so impressed that God, the God of heaven, had singled him out and named him specifically and directly, that he was more than willing to let the people return, to do exactly what God said he would do, to let them go and rebuild Jerusalem, to go and restore the temple. And Cyrus becomes a humble worshiper of the God who knows the future. I think God does such things to make an impression. He certainly made one on Cyrus. He certainly made one on the Jewish people at the time. They saw prophecy become reality right in front of their eyes. Awesome. And I think he does it to impact us too. That we might treat the Bible with respect and with the dignity that it deserves. Because, very plainly, it's not a human composition only. It is also the product of the divine voice. Because only God can see the future and articulate in detail and specificity what will be. Next time, we're going to look at probably the greatest prophecy about Messiah in the Bible. I hope you'll join me then.